I think we can start. Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this ECIA webinar, the last in the series about Risk in Focus 2025. Today, we will focus on a very important risk, even more if we think about our future, and a risk that has seen a major shift over the last year. The topic we will be talking about is climate change, as well as biodiversity and environmental sustainability. We will today discuss the role of internal audit and share best practices and also recommendations with you. I think we can all agree that this is not just about regulation and reporting, but also that it's still a major business transformation we are seeing right now. Before I hand over to our excellent facilitator of the day, I would like to share some logistical details with you. We will be asking for your opinion during this session, and to do that, we will have a poll. To participate in the poll, please use the Slido tool that will appear on your screen, or you can download it on your mobile device. Alternatively, you can answer directly in the chat, so you have pretty much 3 options to participate in our poll. Similar to the poll, we will also use the Slido tool for the CPE certificate registration. At the end of the webinar, you will be able to fill in your details and to obtain your CPE certificate. And last but not least, we will also use the Slido tool for questions and answers, which will take place at the end of the session. So now it's time to hand over to a facilitator of the day, Sabine Scholz, who is an experienced audit leader and a board member of the German institute, the DIAR. Sabine, I think the floor is yours now. And I think you're still muted, so you have to unmute.
Now it's good? You can hear me? Very good. We start again. Thank you very much, Joel, for your introduction to that wonderful seminar, what we are doing here. We did it already for a couple of times. We are now here in order to have a quick look on the results of the study, the Risk in Focus study, which is done for a couple of years and very helpful for the most of the internal audit functions. What you see here is giving some impressive figures, I would say. You have here about 20 European countries which participated in that round. You have about 11 depth interviews with directors, non-executive directors, and some chief audit executive in order, to get more substantive information about the results. And at least in that study, 985 chief audit executive responded. So what we have the feeling, it's a quite good overview about the current feeling, how the risk ranking is there. And nevertheless mentions is that you have 48 participants in the 5 roundtables who already discussed prior to the study the results in order that the paper what you're getting have a really very valid situation described what is in that. If you go to the next slide, Joel. Perfectly. You see here that we have in totally what I just mentioned, that the methodology was already started in 2024. We had a very solid process for that. And at the end, when you go to bullet point 3, you see the analysis of all that surveys, interviews, and roundtables helped us to create that report. And it's a benchmark for the internal audit planning, offering really valuable insights for all of us, and even helpful for we hope that, for the broader stakeholder engagement. Thank you for that. So, coming now to the topic of today, climate change, biodiversity, environmental sustainability. What can we say about that? You will, in a couple of minutes, I will show you detailed slides, but just 2-3 sentences prior to that. Almost 33% of the respondents said that the climate change, biodiversity and environmental sustainability is one of the 5 top risks. And already now 50% said it's their top priority in their audit planning. Very impressive. What we even see that, you know, that on one hand side, and that was a response as well, yes, we have a lot of compliance regulatory initiatives which are helping the organizations on one hand side to strengthen their activities around the environmental sustainabilities. But we have still a topic because these physical factors are still unpredictable, and they will do so. So the transition strategies is still challenging to implement. And on the other hand, the most topic was what was mentioned is that the physical risk assessment, integrating that into the reporting, and on the other hand still have, you know, the transition plans coming slowly, is still a topic, because even here the physical climate change risks are still unpredictable. It means a lot of insecurity in the topic was still driving us, but still you will see that we have a sort of increase. So what coming up will be that our chief audit executives around Europe are sure then by 2028, 40% of them said it would be a top 5 area of effort. Let's come to the next slide and going in the detail what we can see on that. Now, on the right side, you see a nice picture, and I give you some underlying concerning the colors on that. The blue one just is 2025, and the red one is 2028. Let's have a look on the red circle, what you see there, and you see that the technology risk on the first topic, like cybersecurity and data security, as well as digital functions, they are still at the top. But what we will see is that on climate change, we will have definitely an increase, and it will be part of the top 5 risk. Very impressive. And what we look on the next slide, when we have the analysis about the risk priority and the audit priorities, means the question is here, is internal audit devoting its time proportionally? What is here the result? If you go in line 6, you see a very interesting topic. The blue line is the risk priority, and the red one is how much time is spent for that topic in the internal audit plan. And you see we have here sort of mismatch still. However, I would like to go drive your attention to line 6. You see there, business continuity, operational resilience, and crisis management. What you see here is that currently the blue one, it means the risk priority is less than the time spent. And here it seems, we will have that in the next study a little bit more detailed. It might be here that some of the risks are not giving to climate change, but it's allocated to business continuity. But it's very clear, if operations failed or disrupted due to climate change, it's a sort of business discontinuity as well. It's very interesting to see that time, this table as well. If you go to the next slide, we have here now a view on the global results, because this risk in focus study is not, it's done in since a couple of years in Europe, but now even the IIA is doing a sort of global study. And what can we see here? The climate change is expected to increase 16% points to be ranked at 5th. If you look in the middle one, you see in the red curve at line item 13, the climate change development. You see from last year, we have a very small increase, but the risk expectation in 3 years is going tremendously up. And what is here, the reflection, I think it's very clear. We have here the real physical risk, which are coming independently from some, reporting issues. So we have, and that's the only one what is in that strength is going up. None of the other 14 risks are expected to have that dramatic change in the ranking. So I would say it's very good that we are sitting here in order to discuss the topic with my colleagues in a couple of minutes. So that is the introduction to the topic, where we are coming from and to the focus. If you not mind, we go to the next slide. And prior to that, I would like to introduce to you my colleagues. It's here sitting Jan Stoker and Beatrice. They are the panel for today, and we have prepared some questions where we would like to address some topics of in detail what were raised during the studies. So welcome Pascal, welcome Jan and Beatrice for that topic. Let's go. So my first question to that would be, over the past years, many internal audit functions have faced a sort of a clear choice to deal with that risk. Sometimes one option is very clear: do nothing and wait, or focus on governance topics would be helpful as well. Or on the other hand, however, make co-sourcing or have new competences in your department. Looking back, what would you say, Beatrice? What was currently the fruitful, best approach in order that internal audit can attack and can approach this topic from your perspective?
Thanks, Sabine, for the question. Hi, everyone. In my group, I'm in the financial services. The choice was done some years ago, and it was more a strategic choice, so to be in, and to address it as part of the strategic plan to become a best in class. Being a financial services provider, it's not a business with an high impact in terms of environmental risk. So let's say it's an easy business. It's not an energy, or it's plant-tree or agricultural, which are more impacted. By the way, it was decided to address and already to report in the past years. However, the expertise internally was not yet mature enough, so we relied in the beginning with external experts that somehow still support us in different areas, and we will see better in the next questions, but with a very strong effort, because indeed it's not an easy task. So perfectly agreeable the fact that depending on the size of the company, it's a bit a burden to have the right skills, the right instruments to address the details, specifically for the physical risk, also to have access to source of international data that are not available everywhere. So
Perfect.
this is my experience.
Thanks for that, Beatrice. Jan, do you have a different insight to that? Did you choose a different way?
It's for us, it was kind of similar. I would really start with looking at what is the maturity of your organization, which you are part of and are the internal audit department for. So would there already be any risk identified or objectives set with regard to sustainability? Then I would focus on that. Otherwise, of course, you could also look at should there then be a risk assessment? So very signal that there might be a risk for the organization and put the organization into action. And also making internal, let's say internal departments within your organization work on the topic. And if then the organization grows in maturity, then also the role of internal audit, I think, can change from being a kind of catalysator to really reviewing how parties are collaborating within the organization. So it really depends on the type of organization, the type of risks you're involved with, and what you can do. But focus, I would say, start with governance and objectives and risks.
Thank you, Jan, for that. It seems we had that discussion, I think, a couple of years ago with cyber risk. So I think that is a learning as well, how we start within internal audit functions if we need to integrate new risks, right, which we might not have on the plan currently. Thanks for that. Yeah, you already, Beatrice, you mentioned physical risks, and I would like to introduce you to a sort of categorization. Our Italian IIA working group, I think a couple of years, 2 years ago, they already developed a sort of categorization types of risk. And I think it's very good to help for the discussion and make it in nice parts, these big climate change, biodiversity, and environmental sustainability topic. So give me just a minute to introduce you to the sorting of that risk. So what they said is we have one topic are the physical risk. You see that very clear. You would talk about acute risk like events like flood storms or rise of temperature, which can disrupt our operations and really damaging assets. I think that is one, what we just even discussed. I think, Beatrice, you said it, the risk assessment, very difficult, because here you sometimes need specialists on that. Then you have the transition risk. That is the moment where you would say the company need to make a shift from A to B. And here you have, regulatory constraints, technologies, you need to implement new one, sometimes even market related, because your competitors or you're coming in a new competitor's role. Very interesting. And last but not least is sometimes the easy way. It's the reporting risk, because you need for that climate risk quite a lot of related disclosures. And what we have here is topics regarding data integrity, right? And topics like greenwashing, or even, any other topic where you would say, here we have a non-compliance with standards which are required. And when we are going the next steps, we are using these categories in order to make a sort of topics which we will discuss along that order. And with that, may I come to my next question? Jan, physical risks, right? Assessing especially the resilience. What can or how can internal audit support the evaluation of such, resilience evaluations? Physical, especially, the impact on physical assets, considering weather, temperatures, floods, yeah. Is that strongly related to business continuity? Can help there to use that approach as what we are used to do when we looked at business continuity plans.
I would say that really when your organization is in a physical asset heavy industry, then really you should look at these elements, especially on the short term. And for others, it will also be important to know where it is on the long term, because it might take some while to impact the organization. And there is more and more also information available in the market by specific firms who will collect information about these risks. Also, governments will make collections of information where they see flooding risks, for example, and you should be prepared. So actually taking sustainability risk as a driver for other risks, and especially physical risk, is then an important one.
Very nice, Jan. Thank you for that. We are currently seeing the first results, which we're doing with Slido. We brought in a question: how would you best describe your internal audit function's current engagement with climate change, biodiversity, and sustainability topics? And here we are coming, that's very interesting, some results. Exploratory, initial awareness, yeah. About 40% are there. And we see here what we just said, what Jan, you said, yeah, start with governance focus, assessing frameworks, roles, and risk integration. Second place, yeah. It's still coming in. But I think with the, we see already here a sort of, I would say, strong result. Yeah. What shows a little bit what were the results from the risk and focus. We still have a lot of people who are, I like the word, exploratory, some initial awareness, right, to get started for that. Oh, can we just bring that back? Otherwise, I just remembered exploratory, I think it was were around 45% were looking around that. And thank you for that. The next topic were governance focus, assessing frameworks. I think that is sometimes the way Jan, and I think Beatrice, you said that as well. So that seems to have the same topic like the risk and focus results we're saying. And then we have, I would say 13%, it's more than I expected, already a sort of operational embedded, no? Conducting structured audits, including data integrity and internal controls. Yeah. And collaborative, I like that as well, engage through co-sourcing and advisory contributions. That is one of the other strategies, what we saw as well. Yeah, very good. Wow. Yeah. So if we look on that, thank you very much for that, perfectly. I would say nice to see. We will come later to that point again, what we are doing. So we had just, Beatrice, the topic of the physical risk. You already have that. Do you have an experience about how you can evaluate or how you support the evaluation of physical risks in your company? Do you have some experience about that, how you are doing that?
Yes, indeed. We decided to address it starting this year, so it was not. It's a new topic. We decided to engage with experts on one side for the climate risk, and on one side for the transition plan. Different expertise, because indeed I've seen the reports and the details are impressive. And as I said, the main part is to have access to robust international data about the historical elements of weather and changes that were across the past 1,000 years, how the speed that they change and the trend. So to have a prediction of what's going to happen, at least in the next 10 years, because many of these risks have a probability to happen that is not very frequent, but exists, and maybe not tomorrow, but in some years. So the internal audit is one of the functions, is not the only one, but it's one of the functions to maintain high the attention also to those risks that are not urgent, let's say, because some of these cannot be managed, addressed today for tomorrow. So if you have an assessment today that tell you something about what's going to happen in 10 years, you have the time to challenge the assessment, because maybe in the beginning for you it's not a golden source, so you want to be sure that it's not a fantasy, but it's real, and then you have to take time to decide the actions, because it's not an easy one in general. So internal audit, it's one of the functions that can keep the attention high to those topics and to ensure that scenario analyses are performed and approved. So not having only one trend in mind, but having in mind that a different scenario could happen, and also considering the fact that there are international groups. So what happened in one area could be completely different to what happened in another area, and to address the differences. Also to get opportunities in some instances, because I've heard that in many fields, having in mind what's going to happen allows you to be the first mover, so to address immediately an opportunity, not to stay passive. And the last point that I have in mind, which is linked with the business continuity, we are in a business which is highly regulated, so we already have a requirement to perform on annual basis the business continuity reviews, and the internal audit is one of the drivers to take these annual exercise with an angle and attention to the environmental changes. So this is already an entry point on annual basis to drive in the direction.
Very nice. Thank you, Beatrice. You just mentioned that internal audit function is not the only one who is dealing with that. That makes the next point, I think, important as well. What we saw is collaboration. So I think internal audit, how we done that in other areas as well. I think there's no point to say we are, strongly collaborating with other functions as well in order to give a good grip on that, if it's business continuity or the guys from sustainability, if you have there already a group. I think that is one topic as well, that without independency, right, that is another topic, that you are, strongly collaborate in order to get a very fast increase of your know-how, right? Because we are here, and I remember that exploratory, almost 45% said we in the very beginning. And in that stadium, I think it's quite good to seek other departments and saying, we combine our competencies and the time what we would like to spend. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, and I think physical risks are the most, concerning the risk assessment, are most challenged in order to perform a risk assessment, what is valid. When we come to the next risk group, risk type, what we have, it's transition risks, right? Here, it's a good point, Jan. How is internal audit involved in the evaluation of the company's transition to a greener economy? Are you involved in the strategies? Are you auditing the strategies? Is there any strategy? And how would you try to assess the shift if somebody said, yes, we are going that way?
Yeah, I think that organizations via their risk assessment are taking these risks around transitions into their strategies. So it's another one of these drivers for how you would make your strategy, and that should then contain a kind of a sustainability component. So you would be able to look at how which parties are involved, how is the governance around this strategy setting, and are the right people talking to each other. That could be part of any of your audit engagements, which we've done in the past. Also can look at, are there any target set? Where do we want to go, and when do we want to make this transition, and what do we need to get there? So actually see that there is a validation within the organization on which strategies to follow, which actions to take. And you could also look at what kind of external information is gathered. Talking about also maybe about data management to know where is the environment going and your organization within that ecosystem, and how do you want to change? What is the political agenda? Because what we see that a lot of this transition is driven by regulation. So on one hand, you would like to do it as purpose-driven because you want to take care of your environment and all your stakeholders. But on the other hand, we see also in Europe a lot of regulation coming in. So a lot of this transition is regulation-based. So what you will see if you are involved in projects in your organization, that a lot is also about a kind of compliance-driven exercise. And then sometimes as audit is also useful to maybe point out, okay, what about our purpose? Or is it only, do we do it to tick the box on compliance? And do we see actually really risks, let's say maybe not in 1 or 2 years time, but what about in 5 years time? And then bringing that back to, let's say, the organization where I'm working as a bank, and then we see that a lot of the impact for us as an organization is through our clients. So it's not so much on our own balance sheet, but it is about how is it impacting our clients, and where we are, for example, extending loans to, and are they then affected, and what's their impact on the environment, and what transition risk do they face? So you also, as a bank, get a lot of information about what are the transition risks of our clients. You should have that also in scope to decide how I'm going to help give loans to my clients to be prepared for this transition.
Yeah, very nice to see that, Jan, because when you're coming here from the financial side, if you go to the industry side, right, is that where we need to get prepared as well? So then, on the other hand, concerning financing, we need to get prepared from banks. So for the industry sector, it's very nice to see as well that we have see a sort of moment where somebody is getting a pressure and saying, that are my questions concerning your resilience. Yeah, can you give me some information? Very nice. Beatrice, what is your thoughts to that transition risk and what internal audit can do on that?
I absolutely agree with Jan with the struggle on the compliance side and the risk that's taken as a tick the box. I also think each one of us as a professional, as a voice, so it's important to make this voice loud when there is to take the decision. Apart from that, in my experience, the transition risk is very evident and clear for what regards the technological risk. Of course, it's also a reputational regulatory risk, but the technological part is the most important. The role of the internal audit is to ensure that the transition plan, which in the beginning are bit more qualitative, then becomes more and more precise, should be real. Not dreams, but should be made of ground elements. And in our business, we embedded these reviews not to the transition plan itself, but to specific pillars depending on the materiality of our activities, which are mainly the data centers and the facilities properties. Then the procurement as a scope 3, so a value chain impact, also considering the fact that the option of replacing, relocating, or partnering for innovation is a path that it's not immediate. So it's important to start the process because the results are not in 1, 2, or 3 years. As I already mentioned on the business continuity part, because we have an annual requirement. And finally, we also included the human resources part, which is more on the social, but there's also a transition to take into account, which was kicked off by the COVID pandemic, but then it's progressing. So all the matters related with the staff and the working conditions are moving on, and we also address from the internal audit perspective.
Thank you, Beatrice. Quite a broad scope of topics where we can look at in order to give a good picture even to, our stakeholders, audit committee, where are we and what we would like to talk about, the status of that transition to the new economy. Yeah, quite helpful, quite helpful. Thanks for that. Looking at the time, I would say we have now already 2 risks explorated. The first was the fiscal risk. Now we just talked about the transition risk. We are coming to the last one, reporting risks. And a couple of topics we already, mentioned in the other topics, in the other risk areas as well, data collection and the challenges on here. So, however, Jan, when we look for, the data, how we could ensure the completeness of compliance-related data, what is the role of internal audit on that? And have you a feeling currently what is there new systems are implemented, or are these data already integrated in the financial reporting and it's easy peasy to bring them up and collect them for reporting purposes?
I think easy, that is still dreamland, because actually, if you look at this sustainability environment, then this is information which we were not used to collect. And so it's our new information which you have to gather. So actually, a lot of people are trying to find out, where can I find this information and where should I store it? Because if you compare it to financial accounting, we are used to do that for many years as organizations, as auditors we also used to look at it. But actually, we're now confronted with new types of data to be collected on energy labels, on greenhouse gas emissions, and where do you store it? And what you see mostly as advice, that you try to store these in kind of your core systems, so very close to your normal business. So if you're in an industry, or that you try to capture it close to that, and then try to bring it maybe together in a kind of data warehouse situation, where all kinds of departments within the organization can use this information for their reporting. So internal risk reporting, external reporting on the financial side. And you see that actually it is a kind of part of your auditing of your data management framework, but then with new perspectives. And because a lot of this data is also not maybe readily available for individual processors or for individual clients, you might need to revert to kind of market data or proxies of certain sectors. So you will need to have maybe data vendors who sell you the information. But then you need to make a kind of control framework as an organization around that data collection. And so there, as an internal audit, I think you can play a role in reviewing and auditing this data collection and this data management frameworks.
Beatrice, what is your impression about the status currently about the data, the quality of the data?
Yes, also on my side, the quality of the data, it's quite a struggle, despite we already reported for some years, I think 2020, the requirements were not so challenging. So we prepared this year the annual report in compliance with the CSRD, and ESRS requirements are quite strict, also in terms of interpretation. In some cases, we were in a discussion with the external auditors to understand exactly how to consider some topics, and this is not an easy task. I agree with Jan. It's because we are not prepared as we are on the financial data. So to build the tools and the process inside to be sure, also in terms of internal controls, which is the part that we are addressing now. So it's a process, and we will improve for sure step by step. But first year is quite difficult the setup of the system and the process at the same time.
Yeah, very nice, Beatrice. I think I can confirm that as well. I think some of the companies were not, how can I say, really disappointed that the CSRD, that the directive was postponed to 2028 here in Europe, giving a chance in order to have some more, how can I say, cycles in order to improve that. Even in the industry sector, when I talked to my colleagues, it was a challenging way, right? Because the departments are collecting data for the first time. The external auditors already coming would like to see some insights as well. And then internal auditors coming, reviewing it as well, while all the processes are in a sort of development, right? And they are doing it for the first time. And that was quite a mess. But on the other hand, internal audit was even required by the supervisory boards in order to have a look on that. Yeah. But I think there will be not a stop, but it will help us if we have 1 or 2 cycles about that. And internal audit can still, help on that in a way to make sure that prior to the external auditor, that the figures are fine, right?
Yeah. Yes, because indeed the idea was internal audit to support the readiness and not to duplicate the effort of assurance, but the time was so short that the theory was a bit not realistic. And I also heard in many cases that internal and external auditors decided to make a joint team to leverage the expertise of the external auditors, but to combine the assurance effort. So this was quite challenging. I also know that the Institute is working to set up the working group to prepare the topical requirements, because on the external auditor side, they have some guidelines to review, but on the internal audit side, it's quite challenging to provide a value, despite it's just a limited assurance required, but by definition, we don't want to duplicate any effort. So we have to find the right angle to provide a value and not to duplicate any control.
Very good, yeah. Especially as the internal controls, right? Each control costs money for that, and to set up that very in a line, it might be in the next one of the next topics of internal audit, in order to streamline that even, so that we have a cost focus on that as well. Yeah, very nice on that.
And Sabine, as I may also point to the webinar participants, that there is an interesting publication by the Institute of Internal Audits from Spain on the internal control over sustainability reporting. Maybe you will allude that later to that, but that's very interesting, and this can be found on the website of the EAC-IIA.
That from the Spanish guys are very good. Yeah. We have it here in the slide deck, what the participant will have. Very good that you already mentioned that on that side, because, you know, here we have really a cost topic for the companies with this internal control implementation. And I think here the colleagues from Spain did a really good job in order for that. And we have the publication here at the end in the presentation. Now we have discussed about the three main topics. Biodiversity, currently not really heard about that. Jan, can you give us some topics how you would integrate biodiversity in the whole topic, what we just discussed?
Yeah, I really would like to raise the attention for this topic, because I think it's the next topic after really climate change, if you look at the whole ESG spectrum. Also because there's really a link between climate change and biodiversity. I will try to explain that. For example, if you have a very biodiverse environment with a lot of trees, that will be able to capture also the absorbed CO2. So if you also are able then to preserve biodiversity, or even try to increase it, that will help you also tackle climate change. But on the other hand, climate change may also deter the biodiverse environment, because if the Earth heats up, then species might vanish in some areas. It might also be that, let's say, a piece of land be more with salty areas, so you cannot grow any vegetables anymore there. So really there is a link between both elements. And if we as internal auditors want to be a kind of also pointing out where are the risks for the future, then really I would look into this topic of biodiversity and try to get some more information on that, and point out also to your board of directors that this is an important topic to look at. Yeah. And yeah, you could look at, for example, the TCFND, so it's on nature disclosure, and there are other areas where you can find information about this topic of biodiversity.
Thanks, Jan, for that, because that is currently, and we saw that in the discussion and interviews, it's not the first topic which is addressed. It might be that we have here a clear, you know, a sector-specific topic. Some of the sectors are quite closer to the topic, right, than others. If you look for the technology, it's a little bit less, but if you have, you know, in the agri area than farming, in that area, you might have that faster. But you're totally right. I think it's worth that every chief audit executive in that moment just makes clear, is that a topic which is on the priority currently or is not? Because very often you need to prioritize which topic you would like to start. But good point. And there was one result here on the risk and focus studies that was not really one of the high risk area. Very good. So do we have in Slido another question? What we would like to raise here. Very good. Thank you for that. How does internal audit balance auditing for transition risk with ongoing physical risks? How to address both? It's one of the questions. How can I effectively interact with key risk owners during audits? So we wait a second whether we get other questions, and then we can talk about that. Let's start with I think we take it the first one, maybe Beatrice, the first one. How does internal audit balance auditing for transition risk with ongoing physical risk? These movement, I think, how to how it's possible to address both.
Sabine, first to say I don't see the question, but matter. Probably it's a technical issue. No matter. I just respond on my experience.
Yeah.
Probably I'm repeating myself when I say that we decided to address every pillar of every process, let's say, where we see this risk. Because depending on our business in the financial services, the impact maybe it's not as high as in other business. So we decided the specific process where we see much more value, and again the process are mainly the data centers and property and facilities on one side. Then the value chain, so the procurement to address a transition which will take decision on how to relocate or replace or partner for innovation. And recently we also included on the social part the HR.
Okay.
So all of these are areas that in our double materiality assessment, which was an exercise very useful to decide which are the topics, and we transferred in the audit plan the same process, so that we cover the process as a standard approach, but we also look with the lens of the sustainability, so that taking into account any specific assessment, any transition plan on that matter, or any other data point which is provided in the reporting, and that we can verify the robustness. So this is at present our approach.
Beatrice, very, very nice. Yeah, balancing is a good question, because you have only a limited capacity, and you need to set priorities. Otherwise, it won't work. You need to make priorities. Jan, I have a wonderful question, and honestly, I did not introduce that in the very beginning, but it's obvious to discuss that. I read, if you don't see them. The question is, aren't we in Europe at a loss when we see where the USA is heading in the new administration? Won't ESG risk be displaced by political uncertainty? Very interesting questions. Jan, how would you see that in that area? Is USA driving us? What we are doing with that when we see that, what the guys are doing?
Yeah, this is, I think, showing really what kind of backbone you have as an organization. How do you want to stick with your strategy? Is it part of your purpose? If ESG stays at the position it is in your organization, and really, of course, it leads to discussions, and you see then that organizations might say, okay, for example, American banks now choose to step out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, but on the other hand, they said we will stick to the targets we set for climate change. So we will stay that path. So it's a part, I think, for that organization, is part of purpose. It is for our organization, but really it leads to discussions, and people who were not yet convinced might use it for further discussions. But I haven't heard, let's say, from the European government that they will change much of their plans. There's been then, with this new omnibus proposal and agreement, some delay, but still it stays. So I think you should stay the path and make yourself prepared, because in the end, it really are real risks which could threaten your organization.
Very nice for that as well. If you look back, I think there's a climate report coming out a couple of days, and they said that Europe, especially Europe, has really concerning the climate change, in Europe with South Europe and Eastern Europe, we have really a topic. So the physical risk will stay, and that is the fact, and that's the reason why we should stick to that. It's just what you said, Jan, about that the European Commission will go that way. And the point is whether political uncertainty is replacing ESG. I think the answer would currently, as I hear you, Jan, we don't believe that. Because with ESG we can steer something. The other one is just, it's a fact as well. We need to look at our time. We have a couple of minutes left, so we can't, unfortunately, not discuss the other question which were raised. Very good, discussion with the audit committee. It's a topic as well. I would like to round it up here currently and collect some of the, key messages. The panel and some of the other interviews came up and saying, for the physical risk, what we saw is that the focus on governance and process oversight is quite the way currently what the most are doing. It's not the technical modeling, right, what we should do from the competences. There we can collaborate with other departments. And you see that co-sourcing is one of the topic in order to get a good start with that. If you from exploratory, from that step going to a next level of auditing. Concerning transition risk, yes, challenge still of the realism of the sustainability targets, ensuring that, as Jan said, even that, that you see them operational capabilities grounded. I think that is the way how we should do. And have a look on the embedded transitions risk strategy for the audits and for the company, especially looking for supply chain reviews or business model change assessment. Last but not least, reporting risks. Even here, I think we discussed that as well. Start with the governance and data quality. In the moment when the internal controls are implemented, assess them as well for accuracy, and then we are typical audit procedures, what we can have, what we have learned for the financial reporting as well. And even here, coordinate closely with the external auditors to avoid overlaps. It's Beatrice said that very clear, because we would like to support the readiness and always not duplicate, assurance offered. It's too costly, the whole process as well. And we should, as Beatrice said, add value to that, not driving costs above. So that is the summary for that. And now you see, Jan, on the left side, you see the nice internal controls over sustainability reporting. A really good approach how you can have insights and what you can do. And we have some other brochures from the ECIAA, very helpful if you would like to go further with that topic. And now I would say I have my last word. I would like to thank you, all of you who were listening for that hour concerning that. I would like to thank you, Beatrice and Jan, for support that discussion on that. And on the right side, it seems to be very important, CPI certification. You need to type here the CPI request. Don't forget that. I understand it's 24 hours open, but you need to fill that in your name, otherwise you won't get that. You have seen that. So that's all what I have to say. Thank you very much. And I hope we see us in the next year again when we're discussing the risk audit in focus survey for 2026. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.